Salutations, everyone. Today I want to talk about something a little intense. I'd like to talk about WMDs, or weaponizing my disorder. Have you ever had a really bad day? And I'm not just asking those with bipolar, I'm asking everyone. Have you ever had a bad day? Stupid question, stating the obvious, of course we all have bad days. Well, let's say you also have bipolar disorder. You come home from work and tell your partner that you got into a huge fight with your boss because he said something deeply hurtful. The very next thing out of your partner's mouth is, "Well, did you take your medication today?" Followed by the equally dreadful statement, "You're just paranoid and having a bipolar episode, honey." One has nothing to do with the other. Your boss saying hurtful things had nothing to do with your bipolar. Nothing. Even if you did forget to take your meds, your boss still would have said those hurtful things. You still would have been hurt. I know it can be really hard for those around us to know the difference between triggers, symptoms of the illness, and/or just having a horrible day. That's okay. It's not always necessary to know the difference, but it is important to really talk with each other. Don't start trying to read each other's mind. Talk. Say something like, "I'm so sorry you're having a nasty day. Your boss had no right to say those things." If this has been happening a lot lately, you could say something like, "I noticed that this is upsetting you quite a bit more than usual. Is this a rough day for you or something more?" Then pause and allow your partner to respond. You could also say something like, "Are you triggered, symptomatic, or having a rough day? I want to get to know you better so I can be more effective at helping during the rough times." Now, sometimes it can be the bipolar. If I was irrationally upset and my boss didn't say anything to provoke me, then my reaction might be worth examining. If it lines up with other symptoms like a lack of sleep, inflated sense of ego, and rapid pressured speech, my partner could say something like, "This is one of those times where we agreed I would tell you if I see 3 or more signs of trouble. What do you think? You haven't been sleeping much. You get overstimulated or agitated very easily, and you normally love your job. You asked me to let you know when I see signs of trouble, so don't shoot the messenger. I think now is the time to contact your doctor before it gets worse." There's a lot of ways you can discuss bipolar disorder without weaponizing it, without assigning blame. Timing and what you say can make a big difference. Our jobs are sometimes so weaponized against us that we never seek the help we need. We try to lay low so our bipolar isn't noticeable. People in the military are a perfect example. If it gets out that you are diagnosed or treated for a mental illness, things can get messy, especially if the job involves any type of security clearance. It doesn't really matter what job you have. We could probably all share horror stories about how our bipolar has interfered with our jobs, and the ways employers used it against us at times when it wasn't even an issue. Politicians, law enforcement, entertainers, even the nice lady that works at the library down the street or a teacher at the local school might be suffering in silence because of a toxic work environment that weaponizes bipolar. Another place we see the weaponizing of mental health is the news, especially lately. You hear about some horrific, senseless act of violence followed by statements like, "The suspect may have been suffering from mental illness." Why does the media make such statements? Because people can't handle senseless crimes. They need closure, a reason, or a motive. Using a possible mental health diagnosis as a tool to give people closure is unacceptable. "Oh, the guy had bipolar disorder, so this tragedy makes sense." Listen to me very carefully. The vast majority of people with mental health problems are no more likely to be violent than anyone else. Only 3 to 5% of violent acts are conducted by someone with a serious mental illness. 3 to 5%. Many people still believe that only a person with mental illness could commit an act of mass violence. Researchers estimate that persons with mental illness are responsible for fewer than 1% of all gun-related homicides. In fact, people with severe mental illness are over 10 times more likely to be the victims of violent crime than the general population. How sad is that? Something else that gets weaponized a lot is therapy, which means using therapy in itself or the fact that someone goes to therapy against them. Now, please note, setting boundaries or suggesting that someone could benefit from professional help is not necessarily weaponizing therapy. Doing that might actually help someone. I'm talking about someone saying something like, "Why don't you go talk to your therapist about this?" Or, "When was the last time you saw your doctor?" in a flippant, dismissive way. It's the insinuation that I need my therapist's permission to feel the way that I'm feeling. That's weaponizing therapy. Sometimes people will even assume that the more you go to therapy, the sicker you are. I had a recent client tell me that her husband told their daughters that mommy has to go to therapy so often because she's that sick. Absolutely unacceptable. The more I go to therapy, the better my life gets. It's literally that simple. And for those who are considering therapy, to hear it discussed in such a condescending way could result in them failing to take advantage of a vital life-saving resource. Now, in the years I've been making videos, I've had many people ask me to make a video talking about celebrities like Britney Spears. The reason why I haven't is that it's none of my damn business. However, if you want to see a perfect example of weaponizing mental health, Britney's conservatorship is it. She had her autonomy, dignity, and freedoms taken from her. In her own words, Britney said, "Their goal was to make me feel crazy, and I'm not. Once a few powerful people declare you as crazy or unfit, that is what you become. Compliance makes you a passive, willing participant, and objection makes you unstable and unwilling to cooperate." End quote. Legal decisions made based on someone's mental state could have worse consequences than the conditions themselves. Moving on, a really sad place I see mental health being weaponized is in religious organizations. Not all, but some churches would have their members believe that their mental illness is a representation of their lack of faith or commitment. They aren't praying enough, spending enough time reading scriptures, or donating enough. Proper diagnosis and treatment are often discouraged, and people feel pressured to forego medications or therapy. Others suffer unnecessarily in silence, afraid to go against their pastor's teachings. Such attitudes can result in unnecessary emotional suffering and can even lead to members leaving the church. This breaks my heart because you'd think such thinking would go against the very teachings of the church. I hate to see this kind of disconnect. I know how important faith is to a lot of people. Religion can and should support those with mental illness, not weaponize it. The last thing that I want to touch on is that no one is going to feel good and happy all the time. We might not be able to attend a graduation or a special event because of the bad timing of symptoms or an abundance of potential triggers. We shouldn't put unrelenting pressure on ourselves to be a certain way emotionally, to be what we're not. There are days where I feel despair for no reason at all. There are days when I think my family would be better off without me. There are days where I feel so overstimulated, overwhelmed, and riddled with anxiety that I become hypersensitive and struggle to function. This is life with bipolar for me, and it's tough enough to deal with without it being used against me. After years of aggressively treating the illness, these nasty days are now few and far between. I still have bad days, some really bad ones actually. It doesn't matter how conscious or spiritual I am. It doesn't matter how many years of personal development I have under my belt. I'm still and always will be human, and no one is immune from having ups and downs. How one feels should never be used against them. Mental illness should never be weaponized. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you'd like to get a behind-the-scenes look at what goes on when I'm not making videos, come join me on Patreon. You can also message me directly anytime you have questions, access a private community of amazing people, and support my ability to keep making free videos like this one. Take extra good care of yourselves, and I'll be back here soon with more Polar Warrior videos. Stay well.